What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Touchline Talk. Wanted to give some quick thoughts on the first Manchester derby of the season. Ends Manchester City 3, Manchester United 0. Could have, should have been worse than that. Easily could have been 5-0. And it is important to remember, of course, it's very early in the season, but the way that these two teams were being talked about, Manchester United came into this game with more points on the board than Manchester City had. It doesn't mean very much at all, obviously. There is no doubting who the better team was even before they took the field. But I bring that up to emphasize the importance of this game for Manchester City as well. Because we all know the position Manchester United in. They cannot win back-to-back games. It's a mess. You had the debacle in the Carabao Cup. You have a manager who was openly talking about not returning after the international break. It's what Manchester United are right now. None of that is new information. And obviously, these couple early losses for City are getting some attention. But had they lost this one too, and sometimes, right, Manchester United come into these games, and even under Ruben Amorim, they have done this before, but they have found a way to get this particular win to give them some kind of confidence, to stop the bleeding, to feel like maybe there's something to build off of. It's Spurs, it's Manchester United. There's these specific teams that sometimes have success and have success relative to everybody else in the Premier League against Pep and against City. City could not afford to let that happen here if they had any hope of staying in the title race. I know that's an extreme statement to make early, but you look at what's coming next, you look at what Liverpool have already put on the board, you look at what Arsenal are doing. I just don't, the way that they are playing with the new pieces, the injuries, what happened last season, I just don't see them overturning a 6 or 9 point gap when they just simply might be the third best team in the league. They had to find a way to get 3 points in this game, and that's exactly what they did. And the other notable part of this for me is who did it. Obviously, there's been all of this overhaul over the past two transfer windows. This is a very different looking team. But you get Rodri back in there, and it's Doku, it's Phil Foden, it's Erling Haaland. Guys who have been around at least for a little bit. Giovanni Rogers had his moments. One of the players that could have added to the tally and missed a 1v1 opportunity. He's had some really good moments. He's had some games where he hasn't been great. He's still figuring it out. But again, in those big moments, whether he wanted to or was forced to, Pep had to lean on some of these guys who have been around, and they delivered. And that, to me, is going to be a big part of the story for Manchester City this season. It's kind of the flip side of all of the discussion about the new pieces. Are those new pieces challenged by the guys that are still there? And do those guys who are still there have another great season in them? Can they bounce back from last season? Haaland didn't have a good season. He's off to a much better start. Phil Foden was just not heard from last season. Can he go back to being Phil Foden, who arguably was the best player in the Premier League? We know he has that in him. He doesn't have to be the best player, but can he be a major difference maker for this team again? Doku is kind of in and out depending on what's happening and who's there and who's available. But you see every time he plays what he can offer. And all of these guys aren't going to play every week because that's just not how it works in Manchester City, with the exception of Haaland. Obviously, Haaland's going to be in the lineup. But if they're going to contend for this title and if they're going to get back to the top of the Premier League, I don't think it's going to just be because of the new pieces that are coming in. It's not going to be Reinders and Cherky who are carrying this team. They're going to be part of it. They needed something different. They needed to infuse some fresh blood here. But it's also about Haaland getting back to be a 25-plus goal scorer. It's also about Phil Foden becoming a difference maker again. It's also about Bernardo Silva delivering. It's about Rodri looking like Rodri. All of these things that was the real reason for concern through 3 games is they weren't really looking much different than last season. Then this happened. If you're a Manchester City fan, you're feeling better. Of course, it's too early to make any real long-term judgments about what any of this means. Maybe they just had a bad stretch at a weird time to start the season, and this is going to be the team we get moving forward. Maybe this was the aberration, and they are going to struggle again. One win against a team that is reeling and just simply not very good. doesn't answer those bigger questions about City. But I do think it was a very good sign that A, when they needed to deliver a performance, when they needed to look like City, they did, against a team that has a tendency to give them trouble sometimes. And B, that you got some of the players who are going to be key to your success, who are foundational to the City team, involved in the process. That's really all you can take away from this. On the United side, it's more of the same. It's missed opportunities by guys who are being paid and were cost a lot of money to be brought in to score goals, and that's just not happening. I've discussed this before, my concerns with it, and the simple fact that this is just a cultural, systemic thing at United. The attacking players come in and they just don't perform to the level that's expected of them. And until I see something different, that is what I'm going to assume is going to happen. Doesn't matter who the player is. And then you add in some of the concerns specifically about Matheus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo that I've talked about in terms of overperforming XG, and you have yourself this kind of start. To me, giving up on Ruben Amorim doesn't help you at all. I said when he got hired, at some point you just have to pick a guy and stick with him. It's not getting any better. It's getting worse. How you let Haaland be behind you on your side of the field, I'm not sure. That's a thing that happened in this game leading to the third goal. But to go fire the manager now, when he has specifically started to build this team the way he wants to play, which is a very specific formation and system that is probably not going to be utilized by the next manager, which is the problem you have right now anyway, which is that the players that he inherited are not built to play in his system because they're a combination of 3-4 different managers bringing all of these guys in. At some point, you just have to give somebody time to try and fix this because it is way outside of the control of any one manager. I don't know how much longer we have to go to reinforce that. And it's right the question every time somebody new comes in, are they the one to fix everything? And to me, it's just not a simple yes or no question. It's not a reflection of how good of a manager they are. And the funny thing is that the longer this goes on, the more and more the previous managers look like they did a really good job. David Moyes, Erik ten Hag to a certain extent, right? Because it's just continuing to get worse and worse. So considering what I expected out of these two teams this season, considering the potential for Manchester City, right? What that ceiling is when they play really well. I expected them to show up and deliver when they needed to. That's exactly what happened. 3-0 flatters Manchester United. To me, this game was more about, I guess this is what I'll finish with. To me, this was more about Manchester City than it was about Manchester United. We know who Manchester United are. There was nothing new that we learned here. All of the issues that showed up in this game have been there. It was kind of do or die for Manchester City that you need to show up, you need to look like Manchester City in this game, or we're having a very different conversation because you have 3 losses in 4 games, and as bad as Manchester United are, they are somewhere between 4 points ahead of you in the table if they got something out of this game. Instead, Manchester City jump them in the table. Things make a little bit more sense. We'll see if City can kind of kick on from this, if they can stay in the title race. This one game is not enough to determine any of that kind of stuff, but it is an important step in the right direction of City getting back to being where they expect to be, where they should be in the Premier League. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.